over 25 years, I've been making the journey to Mount Everest. I've stood on its summit 5 times. The mountain has given me great joy and close friendships. It's also been a place of hardship and tragedy. In 1996, a fast-moving storm trapped climbers high on the mountain, and people died. Stories were told, forever changing the world's perception, and my own, about climbing Everest. Now, I've come back to base camp alone, to remember, and to reflect on what it was like to be here, on this mountain, 10 years ago. We were all gathered at the mountain's base that year. We'd come with a common goal. I shared their energy, optimism, and desire. All those hopes, all those dreams. But most of all, I remember the climbers and friends caught in that storm. This is their story.
When we left base camp, we were all wary, of course, of mighty Everest in front of us, but this was it. This was our chance. So we took off, and it was a great feeling.
Nobody can go there without thinking this is way cool, just to be able to climb on this thing. Just that idea that you're actually going to put your feet on Everest, I don't care whether you're a climber or you're not a climber, that's big stuff. That's exciting.
We went 2/3 of the way through the icefall and I was hooked. It was the most spectacular piece of real estate that I'd ever climbed on. It helps you to put yourself in perspective with what life's all about.
I got through the icefall and I started crying. And I thought, well, I'm probably hyperventilating because I'm really, really tired. And then I realized that I was beginning to cry because it was so amazing. It's just so beautiful.
I remember seeing them coming up the western comb. It was May 8th. I was already on the mountain. We'd set out a day ahead of the other teams, climbing up the Lhotse face on our way to the summit. I was leading the IMAX film team, but we'd been held up by high winds, and I was worried about the conditions higher up. We needed clear weather for filming. Looking down from Camp 3, we could see them climbing towards us. The mountain suddenly seemed crowded. We decided to go down and wait. On the way down, I met an old friend who was leading one of the expeditions, the New Zealander Rob Hall. We talked about the weather. I took his picture. Further down, I met another friend who I'd known since we were young climbers in Colorado. Scott Fisher was leading his team of clients. The day before, he'd taken a sick climber down to base camp. It was good to see him, but he seemed tired. The next day, I watched from lower down as Scott and all the others began the steep ascent to Camp 4 on the South Col.
When you leave Camp 3 on the Lhotse face, it's the first time that you can actually see the summit. Your goal is visible, and that's very thrilling. What blind faith it's been this whole time, climbing this far without having your goal in front of you.
My very first view of Everest, it was a long moment and a big hard swallow, and the thought was, I'm not so sure whether I can do this.
Leaving Camp 3, we donned our down suits for the first time and definitely could feel the altitude and strenuousness of the climb. Climbing above 24 into 25,000 feet is really hard. It's I don't care who you are, it really is. It's challenging and it's hard work.
This was the first time that I remember registering the air is much, much thinner here than anywhere else I've ever been.
Earlier that morning, there'd been an accident at Camp 3. A Taiwanese climber had slipped and fallen into a crevasse, but he assured his teammate that he was okay and would rest before going higher.
我们在离开第3营往上面爬的时候呢，他告诉我说，他要大概再休息1个钟头、2个钟头以后。
You move out of an area that seems familiar. There is this sense of a desolate place. It's kind of like moving into Golgotha. This is a barren, hard, inhospitable, cold, and I don't mean that in temperature. I mean that in just a sense of heaviness about the place.
In the afternoon, we got a radio call. The Taiwanese climber's health had deteriorated. The Sherpas were bringing him down, and they asked us to help. We climbed fast up the Lhotse face, but by the time we reached him, Chen was dead. The Sherpas, superstitious about death on the mountain, wanted us to bring the body down. Chen's close friend and team leader, Makalu Gao, had just arrived at Camp 4 on the South Col.
David 他就打无线电来说啊，你们的那个陈死掉，我当场哇，我只能说啊，谢谢你告诉我这些。
Sitting at base camp all these years later, I can still remember my reaction. How upset I was by his response and his decision not to come down.
在第4营，陈是最被看好的一个人，他走掉了，我只好硬着头皮去试着完成这么一件事情。
Only now, after hearing his story, do I know why he decided to go on, and how little I understood about what it was like to be high on this mountain over the next few days.
The weather was so crummy that when we first got in there, I didn't think there was any chance that we were going to climb that night.
In our tents at Camp 4 that night, it was living hell. It was absolutely crazy.
It was bad weather, and the concern was, well, what if it's like this tomorrow?
We thought we may have struggled all the way up here, and if this keeps up at all, then the whole crowd is just going to get to head back down and party's over.
about 8 o'clock, the wind died off. And so we were able to snatch a little sleep, as much as you can up there. You just are basically listening to your heartbeat and thinking, wow, the day has come. I can't believe it.
Get ready, be ready, 11 o'clock, we're going. I still remember looking at the faces of the other people. Doug thought it was a bad idea. You could just tell it in his eyes that he didn't want to go.
You had a little cover over your head, a little skull cap, and then you've got this massive thing like this, and you're trying to get your goggles adjusted just right, and meanwhile you can't see to put your gloves on, and you've got your straps. Oh gosh, I got the crampons on the wrong feet. I'll be there in a minute.
因为今天是我能够登上峰顶的一个好机会，然后穿好所有的衣服、鞋子、冰爪。
You get out, you stand up, and it's a different world than the one you saw when you came in, because the night is gorgeous, the wind is still. You can see more stars than you ever dreamed that a place could have, and they're so close to you that you feel like you can touch them.
In front of us is this great silhouette, the blackness of Everest, and the Milky Way was just on fire. It was like a row of lights above us.
It was a vast, open sky, but there on the mountain, I could see the headlamps of Rob Hall's team, and I was worried that we might be behind before we'd even started.
When you climb at night, much more so than the day, you feel like you're alone. And then as you look up and you look down, you don't see the vistas. You see these little cones scattered along in a line of the people that are all strung out as part of this silent progression of individuals, each one in their own world, separated from everyone else in their team, separated from everyone else on Earth.
You start to get in rhythm with your oxygen, you get your headlight adjusted just right and jiggle your pack around, and you can feel your body start to come alive, and the blood flowing, and you're climbing Mount Everest. It's a pretty cool feeling.
走出帐篷外面呢，有3个雪巴跟我在一起。这3个雪巴都是登顶过圣母峰的，前面1个，后面2个。那时候我就感觉很安全，而且实力应该是不错。
Right before the balcony, which was several hours out, after going up fixed ropes in the dark, started to see a little light out to the east.
Within a few steps, you just walk right up into the sunlight and everything changes. You can see what appears to be 1,000 miles out across the Tibetan plains. The sun is now over the horizon and just glittering off of the glaciers thousands and thousands of feet below you. It's an amazing experience, and you know why you're climbing Mount Everest at that moment.
You look across at all these other peaks that were always way above you, and now they're tiny. They're like waves in the ocean.
And you know that few people have stood here looking out over this fantastic sight.
By dawn, the teams were just below the southeast ridge at 27,600 feet. It had been 5 weeks since they first arrived at base camp. Each team was its own small world. The clients were paying their way, and the professional guides like Rob and Scott promised access to a dream.
I felt like a part of something great. I really think that to do something with people for a common purpose is a wonderful thing, and to help people to achieve their dreams is something that caught me as well. So much emotion and experiences and demands of you happen in such a short space of time, 6 weeks of intensive living. I never thought I'd ever do this in my life.
I think everybody has a place in themselves that mountains can fill. Mountains carry great respect with people around the world, so it doesn't surprise me at all that many people use mountains to find this. That's what I did myself.
I'd spent most of my adult life in profound depression. And I John Wayne'd it so that I never let anybody know about it. And I discovered that if you drove your body hard, when you did that, you couldn't think. And that the lack of thinking as you punished your body and drove yourself was amazingly pleasant.
Other people, when their life is at a difficult spot, turn to drugs or drink or credit cards. I go to the mountains. That's always worked for me.
As long as I or human beings believe that by doing something, the world is going to change. By doing this, I'm going to be more happy. By doing that, I'm going to be more successful. By doing this, people are going to love me more. Then I think there'll be this fantastic drive behind it.
Now that we could see the summit, you're just pulled in. You've gone so far up the mountain. You've come so far from home, and you spent 6 months preparing for this goal. There's no way you're going to turn around unless things are really going south.
They'd been climbing hard since midnight. It's vital to get to the summit and back to Camp 4 before nightfall.
I felt very comfortable with the situation. We were inside of our turnaround time, the weather's still good. There were certainly some delays that were unexpected, but that's how climbing is.
And by the time that I get up to the balcony, I realized that I pretty much was out of the game. My right eye was not really usable because it was blurred over, and my left eye wasn't good enough yet that I felt comfortable going forward. And so when I told Rob this, he volunteered to send me down with a couple of Sherpa. And I just climbed all night to get to this place. I didn't want to go. He said, Beck, I want you to promise me that you're going to stay here till I come back. And I said, Rob, cross my heart, hope to die. I'm sticking. And it never, ever crossed my mind that he'd never come back.
Beck had a problem, and it was too bad. I didn't even think that much about that because, a lot of things happen, and could have been me, could have been anybody, but it was sort of like tough break and see you later.
Upon arriving at the South Summit, there were a few people there, and there seemed to be some confusion about ropes and who was going first, and were we using old fixed lines, or did we have enough new line to string across the traverse to the Hillary Step?
Anatola and I tied into the rope together and trekked off towards the Hillary Step over this very beautiful, very delicate knife-edge ridge. And there was a steady enough wind that it would take the rope between us and hold it out in this big arc. It would hold itself out for maybe 10 or even 15 seconds at a time and then drop down, and like a sail it would bulge out again.
It was definitely not a place that you wanted to fall. You had a rope to sort of guide you that was probably staked in pretty well, but the snow wasn't that great for holding stakes. And the fact that when you sunk your ice axe into the snow, you could look through the hole as you pulled it out and see Tibet, and over here you could see Nepal. So you wanted to be very careful about staying right on the border, so to speak. People were stacking up behind us like crazy, and I was feeling lucky to be one of the first people across.
Lots and lots of people were so slow getting up the Hillary Step, and you sort of had to wait your turn in line before you could climb that piece of rock face. And losing 1 hour just more or less standing still on a mountain, that is really the stupidest thing you can do, because speed is the same as safety.
I looked at my watch and I had a sick feeling inside of myself. This is the way I was feeling. I was feeling sick at that point because I knew it was impossible to get there by the 1 p.m. turnaround time.
And I thought, if I keep going now, I'll be out of oxygen, get to the summit, but I'll be coming back down to the South Col in the dark and without oxygen and more tired than I am now. The risks were escalating.
My heart was beating so hard, I felt like it was going to jump right out of my chest. I was almost shaking as I was struggling inside of myself with, what am I going to do? Am I going to keep going because I'm so close, or am I going to turn around?
At that stage, Rob came up past me, and I said to him, Rob, I'm going down. And I could even see behind his oxygen mask, he was visibly disappointed, probably for me, because he loved to get people to achieve their goal of getting to the top. But he said, it's your call, pal. Didn't say mate like an Australian. It's your call, pal. I'll see you back at the South Col. And that was the last time I saw Rob alive.
我是看到前面有人在爬很多绳子，一看几十条绳子，然后那个有队员在那里拉了老半天不会动，我在后面就觉得，哎呀，他的动作怎么那么慢？
And it's not difficult climbing by rock climbing standards, but you have to imagine you've got these massive boots with little rock holds for your feet, and massive mitten hands with little rock holds for your hands, and you're all puffy like the Michelin person, and you're trying to execute these moves at 29,000 feet. And an oxygen bottle in your pack, and it's just very awkward.
轮到我要去拉绳子的时候，才一用力，全身没有力量。要爬，绳子好像又会转，全身没力量。当时才想到，哇，很困难。而且刚刚还想说，哎呀，那些人爬那一段绳子好像很慢。
सबैहरू सँगसँगै जाँदाखेरि धेरै मान्छे भयो अनि बाटोमा पनि अलिकति ढिलो पनि भयो तर वेदर पनि एकदम नराम्रो भयो अनि हामी चाहिँ त्यहाँबाट गएर माथि हिलरी स्टिपमा चाहिँ हामी धेरै पर्खिनु परेको थियो हामी त्यहाँ 2 घण्टा जति पर्खेको थियो
看到前面有那个旗子还有人停在那边又好像有人坐在那边在拍照片第一个感觉是哦峰顶就在前面看一看好像没多远这个时候我告诉自己哦今天确定可以登顶而且告诉自己说就算用爬的慢慢爬我都有把握
I arrived at the summit at 1:25 and for about 5 minutes I really enjoyed the summit of Mount Everest for myself. Then I started watching this stream of people come over the rise above the Hillary Step.
Finally, we came to one rise, and I looked to the next, and there were a group of people on top. And I knew that was it.
In any other circumstance, you would think that somebody could cover that distance in 10 or 15 minutes, but it took some of these people much, much longer than that.
It's not very far, but it's just so hard. And even though there are not that many paces, it just takes very, very long time from there to actually get to the summit.
But soon enough, we were joining the celebration up there and looking down the north side and looking down the west and the east and the south, and we could see it all. We were on the roof of the world.
You can almost see the curvature of the earth. I know you can't, but you can feel that you're up high enough that you're looking down on the sphere. All the hardships that you've gone through and all the discomfort you've been through is completely worth it at that moment.
What I really felt was a massive, massive contentment and sort of a feeling of everything falling into place.
然后慢慢的脑筋就不再在想什么就一片空白然后慢慢说啊要拍照片所以就拿照相机请雪巴帮我拍照片
It was just this cluster of people. I couldn't believe how many were there, but everybody is perched onto this little ridge, so it just looked like the sea of colors. It was hard to even recognize who was who out of all these colors.
It was my feeling that we celebrated a little too long. We were waiting for Scott to come up so we could descend as a team, but he was taking the longest time, and people are enjoying the day. The day was beautiful. There wasn't a cloud out there.
Finally, I was just like, we gotta go. It's getting late now. This is no more. We gotta go. So I remember walking back up to where everybody was and, getting up close into everybody's face, each person's face that was there, and telling them, look, get yourself ready. We gotta go down now.
When Rob called me from the summit at 2:30, it was those familiar words, base camp. This is Everest summit. Oh, and he sounded sort of hale and hearty. He sounded really good. And he told us who had just started descending, and he said that Doug Hansen was just in sight, and he said as soon as Doug got up to him that they'd do a really quick turnaround, and he was intending to descend straight away. I said, what's the weather like? And he said, cold and windy, cold and windy.
Rob and Yasuko and I, we stayed on the summit for an extra 5 or 10 minutes and then took some photographs, and then Yasuko and I headed back down.
Yasuko Namba had just completed the 7 summits. It had taken her 16 years. But she was now the second Japanese woman to climb the highest mountain on every continent.
And then finally we started descending and then getting down over the Hillary Step. I meet Scott, who's on the way up, and I sort of really hug him.
We high-fived, we hugged, And it was just obvious from his movement that he was intending to continue going up.
The first thing that I noticed about Scott Fisher was just how badly he was travelling. Of all the people I saw that day moving up and down the mountain, he was the most unlikely person to be in that situation, still going up the mountain.
Now hours behind schedule, 14 climbers were still high on the mountain. At the summit, Rob Hall waited for his client, Doug Hansen.
आङदरजिरा हामी दुईजना टपमा धेरै 1 घण्टा पर्ख्यो तर त्यो डक आएन डक नआएपछि रोफल फेरि माथि टपमा पुग्यो.
Doug Hansen was a postal worker from Seattle. The year before, also climbing with Rob Hall, he'd collapsed at the South Summit and had to be helped down. He'd worked 2 jobs to save enough money to return to Everest. Finally, he was almost there.
I was in front of Rob Hall. I told Doug Hansen, okay, it's late, it's now bad weather, we're going to down. But Doug Hansen, he didn't talk to me. He just shake his head and then he's pointing his finger and summit.
अहिले रेस्टको अलि माथि भेटेर कुरा गरेर आउँदरजिरा हामी दुईजनाले पुराएर आउँछु भनेको.
Rob told me, okay, I don't want to leave clans behind, you guys go ahead. You go ahead. Leave oxygen bottle and summit. Go down.
From the South Summit, I recall looking back along this Razorback Ridge to the Hillary Step. I saw Rob Hall standing up and Doug Hansen leaning into the slope, resting on his ice axe. I remember giving the normal thumbs up sign like that, and I got the same response from the person I thought was Rob Hall. And that indicated to me that everything was okay and it was time to continue the descent.
We were headed down from the South Summit when I saw Sandy laying in the snow.
There's this person in a yellow suit laying face down, head down the hill, and Charlotte, I recognized Charlotte standing above this person.
I tried pulling her to her feet, and she was just a load of dead weight. She couldn't go any further.
She collapsed. She literally collapsed, and there was absolutely no more power in her to move down.
And then I remembered I had that injection of dexamethasone. Kept it warm inside my suit all this time, just in case something like this happened.
She kind of gives me the nod as she's got basically both hands on the syringe that, is this the right thing to do? And I'm like, yeah, go for it.
So I unzipped the rainbow zipper to her rear end and knew she had layers of pylon, but that the needle would go right through that. And I just took a wing back and
she smiled this crazy, wonderful, maniacal smile and jammed the dex into my leg.
There we also realized that Sandy was running out of oxygen.
I asked Lena to exchange bottles with Sandy, and she kind of looked at me like, you're crazy, I'm not giving up my oxygen, and I certainly don't blame her for that. But I was like, you gotta do this because you're walking right now and she is not.
From then, I believe Tim and I moved together and left Sandy with Neil, and we were just a little in front of the rest of the gang on our way down to the last fixed ropes.
John Taskey was just right in front of me. We basically came to the balcony together, and there was Beck.
So we said, Beck, come on down with us. And Beck said, no, I've basically given my word, I'll wait for Rob, I'll stay here and wait for him.
They clearly wanted me to come down, but they didn't have the conversation with Rob. They did not promise Rob that you'd stay there.
In good weather, that would have been obviously the right decision to make, because Rob was more experienced. Rob had a rope, so he could have short roped Beck down. We'd have had all sorts of trouble.
Beck said he felt more comfortable if we had a rope, and we didn't have a rope, and he said he thought he needed to be short roped, and that was the end of it.
I could have gone down with them, and obviously I should have, but I really didn't want the day to end even then.
There wasn't any sense of being left behind or abandoned or almost dying or anything happening at that point.
When we got the 4:15 call, Rob was asking somebody else in our team, who may have just been below the South Summit, for more oxygen. And he was obviously with someone in trouble.
Rob was on the radio to one of his guides, Andy Harris, who was waiting for him at the South Summit.
Rob was obviously distressed and concerned about something that was going on. There was something wrong.
Andy was last seen climbing back up the ridge to help Rob and Doug.
What really started to concern me at this point was that I started to see some bad weather coming in from down the valley. There was a very black wall of cloud coming from behind ⁷²⁰ further down the valley, coming in low. Unlike a lot of storms that start high, this storm was coming quite low, and it was obviously very fast moving, very intense. In a few minutes I saw the mountains of ⁷² disappear.
Down below, this what was sort of benevolent puffy clouds has now got more of a sinister look to it. It's starting to look like it's, a real storm, and we're walking right down into this storm.
The climbers nearing Camp 4 on the South Col were the first to run into trouble.
A rock came hurtling down the face and knocked Lou's glove from underneath the piece of rope, and it went cartwheeling away with the wind. Following the rock, we didn't know who it was, but it was obviously Anatoly Bukreev racing down, who went straight past us without talking, heading off towards the tents on the South Col. At that moment, as I looked up and saw the tents, I could see the storm coming behind it.
One minute we could look down and we could see the camp below, and the next minute you couldn't see it.
Within the space of 5 minutes, it changed from really a good day with a little bit of wind to desperate conditions. Something I'd never experienced the ferocity of before.
And then I came across Beck Weathers, which caught me completely by surprise, because by this time snow had started to fall very lightly. Beck had obviously been sitting very patiently and very still, completely covered in snow. And as he turned to me, all the snow fell off his climbing suit, and suddenly I could see there was someone in front of me. And I think he said, "Is that you, Mike?" And I said, "Yes." And I think he said, "Well, I've got a bit of a problem. I can't see."
So Mike put me on a short tether, and it was a good decision because I'm coming down and I do make some pretty good missteps. I put down and actually shift my weight onto the down foot, and it's nothing there.
And then to my surprise, still in the gully, I came across Yasuko sitting in the snow, completely and utterly exhausted. So I really had my hands full now, because here's Beck Weathers, who's totally blind, and Yasuko, who can't walk.
there was no more thought about who was on whose team. It was just people.
Fortunately for me, Neil could see my dilemma and took over the control of Yasuko.
I could feel when I grabbed her at first, her arm was limp, but once we got her up and started walking, I could tell she was hanging on tighter because she had hope, and she knew that she was heading down.
可是走没多久，离开 South Summit 没多久，风我觉得越来越大，然后雪越下越厚，慢慢的我发现我踩的脚印是雪巴人下山的脚印，而不是我们爬上来踩的脚印。这个时候雪巴也开始在找路了，然后也在用那个冰斧。
अलि मुनि चाहिँ डोरी थियो त्यो डोरी पायो भने हामी फर्केर आउँछौँ भन्यो तर डोरी हामीले पनि डोरी पाएन नभएपछि हामी चाहिँ उन्दो उन्दो जाँदाखेरि अब फेरि उ त फर्केर जानु सकेन अनि हामी तलै पालमा गयौँ
The Sherpas never came back. They left Makalugao more than 1,000 feet above Camp 4, alone.
可是想怎么办怎么办，一直在那边想。就在这个时候，我听到后面有声音，我的后面，然后有光线，有那个头灯照过来，我就回头看，哎，我的后面就是那个 Scott 在动。
Scott soon collapsed on a ledge not far from Makalugao, too weak to descend further. Now both teams were without their leaders.
On the top of the Hillary Step, which is about as far away from anywhere in this world that you can get, Rob was in a situation where he had somebody incapacitated that he could not pick this guy up and carry him. That's impossible up there.
At 5:15 he called and he said that Doug was weak and yes, I could tell things were very serious.
My feeling was that Rob should descend to South Cole and at least look after himself to be in a position to effect a rescue the next day, as hard as that might be.
When Guy was talking like this, I think Rob sounded a little annoyed that, you know, like Doug might be listening to this.
At the time, I was effectively being the devil's advocate. I mean, I was trying to give him the option to decide that what I was saying was a good idea. He might have been thinking it in his own head, but yet not being able to come up with that decision himself.
I recorded at that time that it sounded like Rob wasn't leaving Doug, and that was kind of like we didn't hear for another 12 hours from Rob.
As darkness fell, the storm was nearing full force. It swept over the South Cole, engulfing Camp 4.
When I got back to camp, I crawled inside the tent, and the next thing I remember was the feeling like somebody was shoving me. But the thoughts were, why isn't anybody here? Why am I alone? And I could hear nothing. I could hear nothing but the wind. It was the wind that was moving me around, like shoving me and pushing me, and it was terrifying. I felt lonely. I wanted to say goodbye. I wanted to say, I love you one more time. I didn't want to die alone. It was something that I never knew about myself would be important to me, to be dying, separated from the people I love and who love me.
The storm, which began as a cyclone in the Bay of Bengal, surprised everyone on the mountain. As it surged higher, gaining in energy, power, and ferocity, overwhelming the exhausted summit climbers as they searched for camp on the hard rocks and steep cliffs of the South Col.
We would walk thinking, wow, the wind's going to want to blow us towards the Kangshung face, so let's overcompensate by going the other direction, and we'll probably hit base camp.
And as you move further and you become more disoriented, and the entire time that you're doing this, the storm, the wind, the snow, the cold, everything is moving, is crescendoing, and now it's the noise level is starting to overwhelm you, and you got to yell at each other to be heard at all. And I don't know whether we're getting a sense of just being led like sheep.
And then we just became hopelessly lost. I recall the ice and the snow stinging my face, freezing my eyelids together to a point where I have to sort of break the ice off my eyelids to be able to see, and tripping over rocks and on the South Col, picking up Beck when he did the same because he fell over quite a lot.
I had no idea where we were going. I knew enough, though, to keep track of Mike Groom's arm, because I thought if I let go of him and I got 3 feet away, I wouldn't have any idea where anybody was.
People who have all run out of oxygen, some of them really starts collapsing, and those of us who are still able to walk try to sort of, pick them up, make them keep walking. This is survival, and surviving in the mountain is to keep moving, never ever stop.
We all felt that camp was close, and we couldn't figure out why we had not stumbled upon it. We had passed discarded oxygen tanks, pots and pans, ripped fabric of tents. We knew we were right there.
We could be 40 meters from the tents and people could die there, but there was no way that we could find our way back to the tents.
On both sides of the South Col, it's this big, expansive flat, but at the edges it becomes precipitously steep.
One side's the Kangshung face, and the other side is straight down the steepest section on Everest on the Nepal side. So, and it was literally, it would have been walking off a cliff.
I just had this strong feeling that we had to just stop and sit down and just wait for a little bit for the storm to abate before we made a decision we couldn't get out of.
That we're beginning on a downward slope off the Kanchung face. And Neil sensed this. I don't know how he did it. That's the reason Neil's a guide and I'm not. But he made that decision that we're going to stop. And then we start to come together, this odd lot of individuals, and we become the huddle.
Most of us knew nothing of what was happening that night. We knew only that many climbers were missing, and that Rob and Doug were still high on the mountain, unable to get down.
I don't think it's possible to get somebody who's incapacitated down the Hillary Step, let alone along the knife edge ridge between the Hillary Step and the South Summit, let alone in a storm. Unless some sort of amazing thing happened and somebody came charging up with a pile of oxygen bottles. Rob was in really deep trouble with Doug.
As time passes, each one of us becomes more and more absorbed in our own world. You can know the other individuals are there, but you're beginning to lose that sense of contact with them. Charlotte says, I don't care anymore, all I want to do is die. And Sandy is about to come unglued. I don't want to die. I don't want to die. My face is freezing. My hands are freezing.
I remember thinking, I don't want to die. I don't want to die here.
Yaska was next to me, and I was pretty much trying to shove her and pummel her and try to keep it going. And at some point in there, though, I had this sense of just gently moving away. I wasn't giving up. I was just becoming unaware.
We knew that going to sleep was the wrong thing to do, and it was too easy to do. You just suck yourself back, you draw yourself back as far as you could into your down suit hood and just close your eyes and take a few breaths, and it was too easy to want to let go.
And that was the point where I just said, you know what, I don't know if I'm going to make it through the night. Maybe it's just easier to just go into that sleep before hypothermia takes you. And just go on and get it over with, because this is too much.
Certainly these were real feelings that people were having, but it was like, well, you know, we just can't go there. It's you know, we're going to be okay. We just got to figure out how to get through the night. It's just about living hour by hour, minute by minute.
Makalugao was caught by the storm far above the climbers on the South Col. He was alone with Scott Fisher, who lay helpless only a few feet away.
知道说，如果我那个时候如果睡觉的话，那个身体就会失温，一失温的话，一下就会死掉，所以一直告诉自己不能睡觉，让它发抖。可是没办法，最后我是警告自己，叫自己的名字，马卡鲁不能睡觉，马卡鲁不能睡觉。我这样叫的时候呢，因为很用力。很用力的时候，那个身体会震动起来。马卡鲁，不要睡觉。所以那个时候我就想到，哇，安妮达跳 disco， 那我现在要来跳 disco， 我要让自己身体运动运动。然后能够取暖，所以那时候我就开始然后打自己，拍打自己，然后脚就踢过来踢过去。这个时候呢，我就慢慢移动移动，我发现。在旁边，我移动没多久就摸到那个这么大的那个 starfish， 我摸起来都冰，感觉都是冰的。然后我靠近，真的呢是个人，然后他就说 I am sick, I am sick， 声音很微弱。哇！可是我听到那个 I am sick， 我想他说他生病，问题是我也没有能力去救他。
This is a situation where people die. This was the real deal, and there was no mistaking the danger of the situation that we were in. We were on knife's edge.
I could almost objectively watch what was happening to me. And then that was fairly eerie, not so much as being an out-of-body experience, but monitoring myself for my downfall.
You're in this little tiny world of incredible noise and cold, and you're going past just shivering and shaking uncontrollably, where you have no ability to stop your body from trying to generate enough heat. You can't get it to stop.
I think it was Neil who spotted the upper slopes of Mount Everest. And once he spotted them, he yelled out something, and I saw the same sight, and quickly, like Neil, were able to figure out where we were in relation to Camp 4.
I associated Camp 4, the tents, as our salvation. If somehow we could just get there and alert people to our position, that to me was how this situation was going to go from extremely bad to better.
there was hope again to get up and to walk back to camp. But I had already let myself get so cold and mentally so detached that every time I stood up, I just fell down. Finally, people had to keep moving and go save themselves.
Yasuko I had on my arm the entire time in the huddle, and when I grabbed her to try to stand her up, she kept falling to the ground. You know, I tried to drag her and help her along, but I couldn't do it.
Trying to get up, trying to get on your feet with a pack on your back, on unstable ground, and in the condition that I was in, was not possible in the amount of time that I needed to stay with Neil.
We were staggering about like really drunk people. Absolutely no resources left to even try to move, but as it was everybody's only chance of surviving, we did it anyway.
And I tried to go with them, but I had Beck and Yasuko, and I think I had one person on each shoulder. But after 20 metres, Yasuko had fallen over twice, and it was just a hopeless situation.
So everyone moved off, and then we tried a few times to get going, and we could see people getting further and further away from us. I remember Lena on Clove's arm, shuffling along slowly but moving, and me wanting to be with her, but just not able to physically go.
We'll never know what happened to Rob that night. It must have been a desperate struggle as he tried to move Doug along that ridge, only a few feet at a time, so far from the safety of camp. And what happened to Doug? Did he still have enough life in him to reach out to Rob and say, "Don't leave me"? Or did Doug ever look at Rob and say, "Rob, just go. Save yourself"? And where was Andy Harris?
so lucky that the direction that we went in led us to Camp 4, because we could have missed the tents by, just a few degrees and kept walking past. We could have been wandering on the South Col forever.
Eventually, we sort of just staggered into the tents and more or less collapsed.
Anatoly was like, "Where's Scott?" He kept asking, "Where's Scott?" And I remember telling Anatoly he wasn't with us. "No, Scott, not here, not here." But people, and I remember turning around and pointing.
Anatoly Bukriev, a strong Russian climber, was one of Scott Fischer's guides. He'd climbed to the summit without bottled oxygen and had descended to Camp 4 on the South Col, hours ahead of his teammates.
Anatoly gathered some thermos with hot tea, whatever could be utilized to really revive people for at least for a little while. And then he set out into the snowstorm.
And at that point, I really felt like I had passed this baton to Anatoly. And I just assumed that this same set of actions was happening for Rob's team, and that Yasuko and Beck would make it back as well.
There was certainly a great deal of hope when I saw the group move off towards the tents. That meant that somebody would know where the rest of us were. Surely someone would come out and find us.
That clearly was what needed to be done. I thought, it's not going to be very long. We'll have help to come back out here, and we'll be back in the tents. It couldn't be more than half an hour, and folks will be back.
We could see a headlamp coming vaguely in our direction, but certainly not striding purposefully. But it was a light, and with a light was a glimmer of hope. And soon it became clear that it was Anatoly.
He just grabbed me and said, "I'll be back," for the rest of the group and Sandy and Tim. And he hooked arms with me and assisted me to my feet, and we started to walk back. I tried once again to sit down every few feet and rest, but he told me not to do that. That was impossible. We had to keep moving. Finally, I came into a tent, and there was Neil with a huge hot cup of tea, and I remember him handing it to me, and I couldn't hold it because my hands were shaking so violently that he had to feed me the first few sips, and then I could put my hands around that cup and warm them enough to be able to stop shaking as much and drink myself.
Anatoly had promised me that he would be right back. At a certain point, I lost hope that he was going to come back, because it seemed like it was taking so long. It was a glorious sight seeing that little tiny headlamp in the distance growing larger and coming closer to us. He came back.
Anatoly spent the whole night trying to rescue those people. He would have wanted to bring back both Beck and Yasuko at that point, but if he had done that, he probably would have died himself.
last part of being there, I couldn't see anybody. I could still feel somebody next to me. And I remember thinking it was probably Yasko. At that point, there was no pain left. There was just a sense of just detachment and calm. And I didn't feel uncomfortable. Nothing hurt. It just was sliding away. Gradually faded into black.
我真的会死在这个地方吗？因为我用很多方法想自己看怎样烧这个弄那个都没有用了，这下子真的只好面对死亡了，真的要死掉了。一想到要死掉自己啊，心里头很难受，因为不想这个时候死掉。可是那时候滚到左边的时候，突然好像看到一点点那个比较淡的光线，不是全部黑的，而且那个光线很奇怪，又像蓝色，又像白色，又像那红色的，一点点。我第一眼看到的时候吓一跳，赶快转过身来。我在想，那个光线好像是人死掉以后，然后下到地狱那种奇怪的光线。然后才给他看一下，好像是那个太阳要出来那么一点点亮亮的，但是不是很亮。你一定要撑到那个真的有太阳出来，有阳光的话，你大概就不会死掉。
When Rob called in the morning, I scrambled out of my sleeping bag and I just remember climbing over bodies to get to the radio. I just had to get there, and I picked up the radio and I said, "Rob, where are you?" And I was really hoping he was going to say South Col. And he said, "I'm at the South Summit." And my heart just hit the floor. Rob once said that if you're stuck up there, you might as well be on the moon.
Rob called saying he couldn't move and come and get me. And when we asked Rob about Doug, all Rob could say is that Doug is gone. At that stage, he asked about Andy Harris. He said, "Andy was with me last night. Does anybody know where he is?"
In the morning, we went through looking through Nambai and back, 350 or 400 meters from South Col. Beck was lying down. I pick up Yasukun number, but she wasn't respond to me. And then I told them, okay, number is dead here. You guys go down, look back.
Gala पनि आइसमा ट्रान्सफर गएछ रे तर म फेर्नु गएको हैन उनीहरु दुईजना गएको अनि दुईजना गएपछि गाला पनि त्यो भ्यूमा ट्रान्सफर पुरा मरेको जस्तो रहेछ रे
They went down, they look, it was totally not moving. They told me same like a number, it's totally lie down.
At base camp, they called the United States and told Beck's wife that her husband was dead.
我听到有人在叫了，马卡鲁斯，我听到了，但是我的眼睛没办法张开，只听到好像在做梦一样，有一个氧气面罩就罩在我这里，然后我就顺势就一吸。
这个。Patati magalu dia yang kang long ya bude ko macak be no de ram bi nong me se iskar ya ma shuke shakhse dang me de shuke thakale ge
Lucasuka sapai phukalera ye rio down sutra phukalera ye te chai u nanga bara bashe cha ani amile chai ya ta uta यसरी के हातहरु यसरी मारेर उ गरेर केही पनि उन्ने थिएन अनि आँखाहरु सबै खोलेर हेर उही थिएन
ए गाँसो माकलु दिला ल दे अजुजु पटे जे शाटवा ngaमे amcho sen yo je da pe tim je mila galo je ana de chadi
那时候也没什么感觉。我的手呢硬邦邦的，坐在帐篷里面这样碰到的话，好像那个冷冻猪肉啊，放到那个冰箱里面冷冻库拿出来碰在一起，就咔咔，咔咔，两只手有那种感觉。
台湾那边陪他们两门学习呢，头些什么，他们要么他回来养陪是家生。
我要走的时候就看一下，两个雪巴，一个就蹲在那个 Scarfish 的身上，给他做那个人工呼吸，救那个 Scarfish。但是救的怎样，我那时候脑筋也已经模模糊糊了。我们雪巴就带我慢慢一步一步的，我跟丹真就慢慢的。 回去South Cole了。
During the morning, the winds became so strong. The Sherpas tried their hardest to get to Rob. They had to turn around somewhere up on the southeast ridge. There came a point that they realised it was too dangerous for them to continue.
It was still blowing and hard to see, hard to find the path. We both decided we may not reach there, or we may something going to be happening for us too.
They were very upset that they had not been able to get up to Rob. They tried their hardest, but these guys were very exhausted.
I was so sad. I came all the way up there to help Rob, but I didn't meet him. I had to return close to by him.
They were about 100 vertical metres below him and they had to turn around and they left some tea in the hope that Rob might possibly get to it, but when I heard that news, I was in tears and Guy had to speak. Tell Rob.
That was a very hard call to make, to have to tell your friend and long-time climbing partner that the rescue that would save his life was no longer coming.
Nobody can come. That day, it's already late. He has been already one night spent outside there. And then, I already thought when we left, he's going to die.
I was now the person responsible for this, the survival of the team, and I was certainly in no condition to even mount a rescue for those who were still outside, or get the survivors of our team down to safer ground.
The decision to leave Beck and Yasuko where they were was not really a difficult decision, with probably partly my medical background, but also what we'd been through the night before was, this was horrific. To see Mike come in very close to death, my estimate would have been at half an hour and Mike would not have been able to move. And here were these other people exposed to phenomenal winds, at least 80 miles an hour, 20, 30 below zero, all night. We thought it was kinder to leave them rather than cause them pain even in a semi-conscious state by dragging them over to where we were. They were basically dead.
When I initially began to come around, I thought I was in my own bed. It was pleasant, it was warm, I was not the least bit uncomfortable. There was nothing to hurt because all the parts that were exposed were dead. And dead flesh doesn't hurt. And it wasn't until I got far enough along that I opened my eyes and could see the ice in front of my face. And then I managed to look over and I saw the claw that was my frozen hand. That I really, at that point, I knew exactly that I was somewhere on that col, somewhere on that mountain. I was on my own. Well, I was as good as dead. Then when I saw my wife and children just directly in front of me, that's what drove me. And that got me up, and that got me moving. I fell down a bunch of times. I was just trying to keep from going in circles. I remember one thing that was pretty unsettling. I can see the sun, not the rest of the stuff around, but I can see the big yellow ball up there, and I'm looking at it, and it's about there as I'm looking above the horizon. And as you well know, when that sun goes down, the place changes rather dramatically from something which is survivable to something which is just horror on earth. I'm shuffling along, aware that I'm hallucinating. And as I was getting closer to these blue objects, and I'm really not aware yet that the blue things are the tents, it rolls through that they might be, but I don't really know that. And it's only when somebody stands up in front of me and we look at each other over one of these blue rocks do I realize that I'm back. I'm in the tent, I'm in a sleeping bag, and they know that I'm here.
An hour before dark, I radioed Rob to tell him that his wife, Jan, was calling from New Zealand on the satellite telephone at base camp, and that I was going to patch him through to her. And he said, "Hold on a minute, mate. I've just got to put some snow in my mouth to moisten it. I'm a bit dry," before he could talk to her, which, you know, was Rob just wanting to make sure that when he did talk to Jan that he came across sounding good, and probably to reassure her that he was okay and this was just a bit of a fix, but he was going to get his way out of it.
And I guess nobody wanted to admit it to themselves that it was going to be their last call. It was something that was just never said. And as I put the call through and held the microphone of the radio against the satellite phone, I was almost doubled up, holding my hands up with the phone because I was crying so much. And I felt that in some ways it was terrible to be doing. It was a terrible thing as well as a really good thing. It nearly broke my heart, but I was glad that I could do that for them. And every time he spoke to Jan, he lifted. And so that's the most important thing I think I've ever done.
On the second night, the winds blew up even more than the first night. And at one stage, the moorings that were holding the tent to the rocks started to give. I didn't realise that Beck was alive. And what surprised me more was when I heard that the whole night he had been in a tent no more than 10 feet from where I was.
During the night, I woke up and I realized I was completely alone, and I'm incredibly thirsty. So I call out enough till finally one of the Sherpa comes over and he has a thing of hot tea. And he's right outside the door of the tent. And I try to get him to come into the tent and he won't come in. We sit and stare at each other for a while. I can't get out and he's not coming in, and eventually he wanders off. I think there was something about me that had an air of death.
On the morning of the 12th, I tried to raise Rob on the radio from base camp, but there was no response. We tried repeatedly through the day. We always were monitoring the radio, but we didn't hear from Rob again. There were so many people needing assistance and help from South Cole that there was just no possible way to initiate another rescue effort.
In the morning of the 12th, still laying there thinking about what we're going to do, Mike Groom unzipped the door of the tent and said, "Got to get out of here? Hey, Mike, how you doing? Boy, good to see you." I thought Mike was gone. But all of a sudden, Mike made a miraculous survival, and he's back, and he said, 20 minutes, we're going.
I did the rounds of the tent and said, we're going to leave in half an hour, make sure you've got your oxygen and whatever personal belongings you want to take back to base camp, and be ready to leave in half an hour time. And I passed one tent, and what caught my eye was the fact that the front door was open and the back door was open, and a pair of climbing boots sticking out the end of the tent. And I really didn't think much of it, except to think, well, that's one unfortunate person that didn't survive last night. And because I didn't recognise the person, because on the upper part of their body there was a sleeping bag draped loosely over the upper part of their body and their head, which you sometimes do with a dead body. And people have asked me, well, why didn't I look to see who was underneath it? But I've seen enough dead bodies in my life to not to want to have to do that. So I just dismissed it as someone who didn't survive the night. But I didn't know it at the time, but that was actually Beck Weathers.
No one had told him that Beck had come back. Beck had been put in a tent alone, left for dead once again.
I really don't know what the time is. I've lost sense of how much time has passed. It's daylight. I'm yelling out to try to get some connection again, some attention that you can see another person. That's what I really wanted.
Incredibly, one of the last people leaving camp heard Beck calling out. The news traveled down the mountain. The man everyone thought was dead was coming down.
After descending the Lhotse face, I came across David Brashears, who was holding out a water bottle to me. And as I was drinking, he said, "Do you know Beck's alive?" You could have slapped me in the face and not surprised me as much as that. And I uttered some expletive deleted and said, "That's not true." And he said, "Have a look for yourself." And I looked up across the Lhotse face towards the Geneva Spur, and there were two people helping this fellow down in a suit, which was obviously Beck's suit.
I was alive again. I was coming back. Even if I just fell apart at this point, I was going to get off the mountain. And the hardest part, the dangerous part, the part where you're going to get wounded is all behind you. And now it's simply a matter of getting home.
For days, people have been dying all around me, and I'm having no emotion. My emotions were frozen as my body almost. But what's in fact happening is they're all storing up inside of me for this moment. It wasn't until I got through the very last section of the ice fall when I could see people up ahead from our base camp, and I sat down and I cried and cried and cried. I never cried like that in my whole life, I don't think.
When we got down to the base camp and I walked in for the first meal into the mess tent, that was probably the second biggest shock. The enormity of it all hit me in one fell swoop. Looking around and seeing all these faces, half of the people that I knew weren't there anymore.
That leaving was so hard, and I remember being so slow as I couldn't stop turning around to look. It was so hard to turn your back on the mountain with Rob and Andy and Doug and Yasko and Scott Fisher, all lying up there.
"今天，如果我知道登这个山会切掉手指、挖掉鼻子或者切掉脚的话，我不去登山，因为没有那个必要。可是，当我很小心的准备好了，装备各方面都准备好，体力、技术都 OK 了，我尽我所有的能力去努力准备，然后去登山，结果遇到不可预测的意外，那我接受这个事实，这是我的想法。
Everybody always says that the definition of character is what you do when nobody's looking. And when we were up there, we didn't think anybody was looking. And so everybody did pretty much what their inner person, the real them, the exposed them would do. And some individuals come out of that, I think, justly proud of their actions. Others would probably never want anybody to know. I was fortunate. I got to be witness to those acts, the good ones, the bad ones. And the individuals that came through that did well, that were selfless, I mean, every one of those people, every one of them is, to me, a hero. Even if nobody knows that.
For as long as people are drawn to Everest, this line of memorials will continue to grow. The mountain doesn't care whether we're here or not. It doesn't compete with us. It isn't burdened by our hopes and dreams. Everything it means to us is only what we bring to it. It's what the mountain reveals about us that has any lasting value.